He's a quiet black boy, legs swinging, flipping through a comic book while the world passes him by. But somehow, that was still too much. The glances started small, first from the receptionist, then from the couple near the fireplace, then from the security guy pretending to check his radio. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Suspicion doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it just tightens its jaw and stares. All he did was wait for his mother. Wait for her to come down from the tech summit upstairs. Wait to be treated like he belonged, even though he already did. But that lobby didn't see a child. It saw a problem. It saw brown skin, a hoodie, no suitcase, no parents in sight. And suddenly, reading a comic book became reason enough to call the police. The front desk didn't ask. They assumed. Security didn't verify. They cornered. And when the officer stepped in, hand on holster, asking him questions like he'd just robbed the minibar, everyone in that hotel watched it unfold. Phones didn't come out. Not yet, because no one expected what would happen next. But then, the elevator dinged, the glass doors parted, and she walked in. Her heels echoed like a verdict. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't have to, because when she saw her son surrounded by uniforms and fear, she didn't flinch, she didn't beg, she didn't even blink. She just looked straight at the manager and said, "Who laid hands on my child?" And in that instant, everything in that luxury hotel flipped. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me what country you're watching from in the comments. You're going to want to hear the rest of this. The hotel was quiet in that way only expensive places manage to be, where the floors don't creak and the furniture never looks touched. I sat near the window, legs swinging off the edge of a chair way too big for me, flipping through my comic book like I'd been told. Mom was upstairs speaking at some tech event, or big keynote or something. She dropped me at the front and told the receptionist I'd be waiting. The woman nodded politely enough, but her eyes didn't match her voice. I noticed that. I picked the seat closest to the elevators so I could see her the second she came down. I didn't bother anyone, didn't even take the free water bottles on the tray near the fireplace. Just sat, reading, like I was invisible. The first time I looked up from my comic, I caught the front desk manager watching me. She looked away fast, but then I noticed her whispering to the concierge. Both of them glanced over like they were trying not to be obvious, but they weren't doing a good job at hiding it. I lowered my book and stared out the window instead. A couple walked past me, white, mid-40s maybe, and the woman clutched her purse just a little tighter. Her husband looked at me, then looked toward the front desk like he was expecting someone to come over and handle it. I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of everything. The way my hoodie hung loose, my backpack on the floor, the fact that I wasn't holding a hotel key or a juice from the overpriced cafe across the room. Just me, a kid with dark skin and a comic book, sitting in a place I wasn't supposed to look comfortable in. Then I heard the front desk phone click down. The manager had stopped whispering. Now she was walking toward me. Smile tight, posture stiff, like she'd already made up her mind. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you a guest here?" I looked up slowly. "My mom is upstairs. She's speaking at the tech conference." "Okay," she nodded but didn't move. "Do you have a room key or a badge?" I shook my head. She told me to wait right here. Her smile didn't fade, but her tone dropped a little. "Well, guests typically wait in the cafe if they don't have a key." I pointed toward the reception desk. "The woman there said I could wait right here." The manager paused, turned halfway back, then looked at me again. "And who exactly is your mother?" "Elaine Blake," I said, trying not to sound defensive. She blinked. The name clearly didn't register. "I'll need to verify that," she muttered, stepping away and pulling out her phone. I watched her from my seat, my chest tightening. She wasn't calling my mom. She wasn't calling the event organizer either. She was calling someone else. A man in a black blazer and earpiece stepped out from behind a marble column near the hallway. He looked at me like he was trying to decide if I was a threat or a misplaced guest's kid. Security. And just like that, I wasn't a boy waiting for his mom. I was a problem they needed to solve. The man in the black blazer approached slowly, not aggressive, but definitely not casual either. He stopped a few feet away and spoke into the mic, clipped to his collar. I could hear his voice crackle faintly through the earpiece as he described me. He didn't say hello, Didn't ask if I was okay. He just stood there, arms folded, watching me like he was waiting for me to do something wrong. The hotel manager returned, this time with a different kind of smile. The kind adults use when they think they're being patient, but they're really just irritated. "I'm going to need to see a room key, sweetheart," she said. "I don't have one," I replied. "My mom is upstairs." "Right, you said that before." Her eyes darted to the man beside her. "Can you tell me your room number?" "No," I answered. "She just said to wait here until she was done." The manager crossed her arms. "Okay, what's her phone number?" I pulled out my phone and showed her I had just tried calling. "She's on stage," I said. "She said she wouldn't be able to answer until it's over." Now the man in the blazer spoke. "We've had complaints," he said flatly. "Some of the guests are uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable with what?" I asked. The manager turned slightly, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. "This is why we have policies. If someone's not a verified guest, we're allowed to ask them to leave common areas." "But she told me I could wait here," I insisted. "That lady right there." I pointed toward the front desk, where the receptionist quickly looked down at her computer. "Sir," the security guy said firmly, "let's keep our voice down." Voice down? I hadn't even raised it. I swallowed hard and looked back at the manager. I didn't do anything. She didn't respond. Instead, she pulled out her phone again. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I knew. Something in her expression made it obvious. She wasn't trying to get in touch with my mom. She was calling someone else. I stood up, quietly slipping my phone back into my pocket. My legs were a little shaky now, but I kept my face calm. A family passed by, a woman and 2 boys about my age. She looked at me, looked at the manager, then kept walking like nothing was wrong, like none of it mattered. The man with the earpiece moved closer. "Are you refusing to leave the lobby, sir?" I blinked. "I told you I'm waiting for my—" "That's not what I asked." I sat back down. My hands were cold, my fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of my seat, and then the words came. Words I've heard too many times in too many stories. "We're going to have to involve the authorities." Because a black boy sitting still with a comic book was somehow more dangerous than silence. The manager nodded again and walked off toward the front desk, dialing. The man stayed planted beside me, unmoving. I looked at the clock. Mom's talk wasn't supposed to end for another 20 minutes. And I could already hear the police sirens in my head. The man in the blazer hadn't left. He stood less than an arm's length from me, not saying a word. Just hovering. I kept my eyes on the floor, pretending to read the same comic panel over and over, but I wasn't taking in any of it. I could feel the air shift in the room. Not a chill, just an awareness. Like everyone else had silently agreed I didn't belong here. The lounge chairs were filled with guests sipping drinks and tapping their phones, but every now and then, one of them would glance over. A second too long. A judgment too clear. 2 young girls by the fireplace giggled about something until one of them pointed at me. Their mother leaned in, whispered something, and they quickly turned back around. A white man in a business suit stood behind the bar watching like I might lunge or bolt, like I was a threat. Still, I hadn't even moved an inch. The receptionist wouldn't meet my eyes. She just typed away at her keyboard, tough and glancing up every few seconds to see how things were going. Or maybe to check if I'd caused trouble yet. And then came the radio chatter. Another hotel staffer walked past, pressed a finger to his earpiece, and gave the security guy next to me a quick nod. That's when I knew. Police had been called. I pulled out my phone again. No texts, no missed calls. I hesitated, then pressed redial. It rang once, twice, then voicemail. She was still on stage. I didn't know whether to try again or not. I didn't want to make things worse. I could already feel them building a story around me, one where I was being uncooperative, evasive, suspicious, but I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't touched a thing. I hadn't even stood up since the first time I sat down. The security guy finally spoke again. "Look, if you're just here waiting, that's fine," he said. "But you've got to understand how this looks." "How what looks?" I asked. He shrugged, but his eyes said it all. It wasn't about how I was acting, it was about how I looked, what I wore, who I was. There was no incident, no broken rules. But someone, somewhere in that lobby had felt uncomfortable. And in places like this, discomfort can be a weapon. A few minutes later, I saw the hotel manager walk out again, her face stiff, posture locked tight. She was followed by 2 men, police officers. One wore his badge clipped to his belt, the other had it around his neck. They didn't look around. They walked straight toward me. I felt my stomach twist, but I stayed seated. The first officer said my name, mispronounced it, of course. I corrected him, gently. He didn't like that. "Are you here with anyone?" he asked. "My mom." "And where is she?" "Upstairs, speaking at the tech conference." "Do you have a way to reach her?" "I already tried. She's on stage." They looked at each other. The one on the left scanned the room. The one on the right looked at my hands. "You carrying anything you shouldn't be?" he asked, voice low. I blinked. "No." "Mind if we check your bag?" I hesitated. One of them stepped forward. That's when I said quietly, "She's the keynote speaker. She's supposed to be done soon." But they weren't listening. They were here to confirm the suspicion that already took root in everyone else's mind. One of the officers crouched slightly, trying to look approachable. The other stayed standing, arms crossed like he was waiting for something to pop off. I could see the outline of a taser on his belt. I'd never seen one up close before, and I didn't want to again. "I'm gonna ask you again," the crouched officer said. "Are you sure you're here for someone?" I nodded. "My mom, she's here for the tech conference. She's the main speaker today." "And you don't have a room key, right?" he asked. "No, she told me to wait down here." The other officer stepped in. "What's her name?" "Elaine Blake." He typed something into his tablet, then glanced at the hotel manager. She walked over quickly, like she'd been waiting for the moment to insert herself again. "I couldn't find that name in our current guest list," she said, voice clipped. "And no one from the event team could verify a child was expected." She looked at me with the same fake polite smile, the kind that doesn't make it to the eyes. "I already told you," I said more quietly now. "She's speaking at the conference. The woman at the desks said I could wait here." The desk receptionist was nowhere to be seen anymore. One of the officers let out a short breath through his nose, like he was getting annoyed. "Look," he said, "you don't have ID, you don't have a key, you're not listed. That's 3 reasons to believe you may not belong here." I looked down at my comic book. I wasn't reading anymore, but I held it like a shield. "Can you stand up for us?" the other officer asked. My legs moved before I could think. I stood, backpack on one shoulder, hands stiff at my sides. Another hotel guest nearby finally pulled out a phone and began recording. Maybe it was the badges, or the fact that I hadn't raised my voice once and still ended up surrounded by 2 officers and a hotel manager. A few heads turned. Still, no one said anything. That's when I heard it. A voice. Soft at first, like it was trying to break through static. "Mom," I said it to myself. Not out loud, just a quiet whisper to the air. Then I called her again. This time she picked up. "Hey baby, I just stepped off stage. You okay?" "Mom?" I tried not to cry. "They called the police on me. They won't let me stay in the lobby." There was silence on her end, not even breathing. Then her voice returned. "I'm on my way down, right now." She just hung up. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stood still. One of the officers asked, "Was that your mother?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Because the elevator had just dinged. The elevator doors opened, and for a second, no one moved. The officers looked toward the sound. The manager adjusted her blouse. The security guard stepped slightly to the side like he expected someone. She stepped out calmly, heels striking the polished floor in measured, deliberate taps. Her posture was straight, her chin high. She wasn't rushing, but every person in that lobby could feel her arrival. She walked straight to me, eyes never leaving mine. "Are you okay?" she asked. Then she turned, slowly, like she wanted everyone to see her face before she spoke. Her gaze landed first on the manager. "You called the police on my son?" The manager's smile faltered. "Ma'am, I didn't realize that he was a child," my mom cut in, voice cold. "Or that he was black?" The officer straightened. One of them cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we were called because there was no confirmation of his status as a guest." My mom ignored him. She looked straight at the hotel manager. "You didn't ask his name before you picked up the phone. You didn't check with the event coordinator. You didn't call me. You just assumed." "I had no idea he was your son," the manager said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And if he wasn't?" my mom asked, folding her arms. Would that have made what you did okay? My mother glanced at the phone in my hand. You called me twice, and no one thought to wait 5 minutes before treating him like a criminal? The other officer stepped forward, tone slightly softer. Ma'am, with all due respect, the manager indicated there had been complaints. We were responding to a situation. My mother turned her head. He was sitting with a book. The lobby, so loud with whispers and movement before, had gone still. A few more phones were recording now. Someone near the back had stepped out of the elevator and was holding up their phone, slowly panning across the scene. My mother adjusted the cuff of her blazer. "I'm Elaine Blake," she said, her voice carrying across the marble walls. "CEO of Veritech Systems and the keynote speaker at this morning's tech summit. I also sit on the board that manages this hotel brand's investment trust." The manager's face went slack. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. "And this," my mom added, placing her hand gently on my shoulder, "is my son, who was treated like a trespasser in a hotel where we've paid thousands for suite access, conference use, and guest services." The security guard looked like he wanted to disappear. My mom's voice lowered, not out of fear, but finality. "I don't want excuses. I want accountability." For once, they were the ones without answers. And in that quiet, I felt something shift. Not in the way they looked at me, but in how they started looking at her. The officer who had spoken softened his tone. "We didn't know," he said, as if that somehow made any of it better. My mother turned to him. "You didn't ask." The hotel manager stood still, blinking, lips parted, but unable to form a single useful sentence. Her confidence had drained with every word my mom spoke. Now she looked like a student who just realized she hadn't studied for the test. My mom looked back at me. "You okay?" she asked again, more gently now. I nodded, though I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. I just didn't want to make things worse. She pulled out her phone and made a call. As it rang, she stared directly at the manager, whose face had gone almost gray. "Yes," she said into the phone, voice low but forceful. "This is Elaine Blake. I need to speak with your regional director, immediately. Tell him I'm in the lobby and that a manager at this location just had the police called on my 11-year-old son." That got the receptionist's attention. She ducked behind the desk. My mother ended the call and looked back at the officers. "I want names, badge numbers, and a copy of the report being filed." "There isn't a report," one of them said quickly. "Good," she replied, "because I'll be filing one of my own." The taller officer looked uncomfortable now. "Ma'am, again, we're sorry. We were just responding to a call from management." "And next time," she said, cutting him off, "respond with your eyes open. This boy didn't raise his voice, didn't move from his seat, and still, you both walked in with your hands near your weapons." The officer glanced at his partner but said nothing. My mother turned to the hotel manager again. "I want the general manager here. Now." The woman stammered. He's not on site." "Then get him on the phone," my mom said. "Or do you need me to call the national office myself?" The security guard, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly found his voice. "I think we should let the boy and his mother have some space." My mom gave him a look that made it clear she didn't need his permission. Then, for the first time, she stepped away from them and sat down next to me. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said. "Understand that, ever." I nodded again. "I shouldn't have left you down here," she added quietly. "I should have known better." "No," I said softly. "You should have been able to." Her eyes met mine, and I saw the pain there, not just from what had happened, but from the fact that this wasn't the first time. Not for her, not for me, and likely not the last. A hotel staffer approached, this one wearing a suit and tie, clearly summoned from somewhere deeper inside the building. His voice shook slightly when he spoke. "Miss Blake, I just heard what happened. Please accept our deepest apologies. I assure you, this is not representative of our values." She stood up again. "You say that like your values were the ones I just met at the front desk." He opened his mouth, but she raised a hand. "I'm not here to debate. I'm here to make it clear that what happened today will not be ignored. My team will be in touch." Then she looked down at me. "Let's go." And just like that, she turned away from all of them, the officers, the manager, the phone still recording, and walked out, holding my hand. No anger, no yelling, just power. We didn't walk far. Just outside the lobby, past the automatic glass doors, where the fresh air felt like something I hadn't tasted all day. My mom crouched next to me, placed both hands on my shoulders and said nothing at first. She just looked at me. Her eyes scanned my face like she was memorizing every piece of it. The fear I tried to hide, the stiffness in my jaw, the questions I couldn't ask out loud. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. "You stayed calm." "I didn't know what to do," I replied. "You did exactly what you should have done," she said. "You stayed still, you stayed safe, and you called me." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pulled it back before it broke. Before either of us could say another word, her phone rang. She answered, turned her back slightly to shield me, and spoke in low tones. Her voice changed. That CEO cadence I'd heard on calls at company dinners when she was in full control. "No," she said into the phone. "I'm not filing a private complaint. I'm initiating a corporate-level response. Yes, immediately. I want the chain's regional director, legal team, and DEI liaison on a joint call by end of day." Pause. "No, this is not just about that location. This is systemic, and we will treat it as such." She ended the call and stood still for a moment, watching the street like she was grounding herself. Then she turned to me and said, "We're not done here." She walked back into the hotel, and I followed. But everything had changed now. When we stepped through those glass doors again, the staff stood a little straighter. The same lobby that felt so hostile minutes earlier now had an eerie hush over it. People had moved out of the way. No one was asking questions. No one was smiling fake smiles anymore. The general manager, the one who wasn't on site, had magically appeared. He stood near the reception desk, red-faced and sweating, even in the air-conditioned space. "Miss Blake," he stammered, "I can't express how sorry we are." "You will," she said calmly. "But not to me. I want you to apologize to my son. Right here. Right now." He turned to me, clearing his throat. "Young man, I sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. This is not how we operate. I hope you'll accept." "Stop," my mom said. He froze. "I don't want him to accept anything," she said, "because he did nothing wrong. Your team did. And you let that team create a moment where my child was treated like a suspect instead of a guest." She gestured toward the chairs, the same ones I sat in earlier. He was sitting there, quiet, still, holding a comic book, and your staff still saw him as a threat. The general manager's eyes darted to the few phones still recording from across the room. "I'll be reporting this to the board," she continued, "and I will not rest until every property in this chain has mandatory bias training. Not the kind you tick off in a box, but one that starts with this exact footage." The manager looked like he wanted to crawl under the marble. "And for the record," she said, "we're canceling all future contracts between my firm and this hotel group. That includes tech partnerships, corporate housing, and event space." Gasps. One of the desk clerks dropped a pen. Then she turned to me, and her voice softened. "You ready to go?" I nodded. This time, we didn't sneak out like troublemakers. We walked out like people who knew exactly how much we were worth and how long we'd been underestimated. By the time we stepped back outside, her phone was already vibrating again. People had seen the video. Someone must have posted it. The clip of her walking into that lobby, the confrontation, the way the officers froze when she named her title. It was moving fast. Faster than anyone in that building expected. She ignored the call. We crossed the street to a quieter bench near a water fountain. For a second it was just us again. She sat beside me, but the way she carried herself hadn't changed. Even outside, away from the chaos, she held the same composure. The kind that comes from a woman who's spent years forcing rooms to listen to her, even when they didn't want to. I looked up at her and asked, "They really didn't believe I was your son?" She looked down, then shook her head. "They didn't want to believe it." "Why?" She didn't sugarcoat it. "Because when they see a black child sitting alone in a hotel lobby, they see risk. Not family, not innocence, not a boy who just wants to wait for his mom." I let that sit for a while. Then I said, "But when you came in, they looked scared." "They weren't scared of me," she said. "They were scared of who I am, of what I represent. That's the part that hurts. I shouldn't have to wear a title for them to treat you like a human being." I nodded. She looked back toward the building. They thought they were dealing with a child who had no voice, no connection, no power. But they were wrong. They always are. A car pulled up, her driver. She waved him off and kept talking. This is what I fight for every time I walk into those rooms upstairs. Every time I'm asked to speak on a stage or sit on a board or lead a meeting full of men who talk over me. I fight so that next time a child like you walks into a place like this, they're not seen as a disruption. Her voice tightened again. They're seen as a guest. She took a deep breath and finally answered one of the calls buzzing her phone. Yes, we'll be releasing a statement within the hour. I'll approve the draft myself. Pause. And yes, I'll be naming the hotel. When she hung up, she glanced at me again. Do you want to go back to the room or head home? Can we just go home? Of course. We got in the car. I looked out the window while she made another call. This one to her legal team. No yelling, no panic, just instructions. Clarity, control. As the city blurred past the glass, I thought about how fast everything had changed. How 1 second I was just reading a comic, and the next I was being treated like I didn't even deserve to be indoors. And the only thing that stopped it was her walking in. Just showing up with enough power to make everyone else fall silent. Because she wasn't just my mother, she was the CEO. The next day, her face was on the morning news. Not just hers, mine too. Blurred slightly in some reports because of my age, but the story had gone national. Black child mistaken for trespasser in luxury hotel, mother revealed as CEO. Headlines varied. Some got the facts right, some twisted it. But the video didn't lie. They saw me, small and still in that chair. They saw the manager's posture, the officer's stances, the silence of bystanders, and then they saw my mother walk in and flip the entire situation without raising her voice once. I watched the coverage from our living room. Mom paced nearby, toggling between calls and emails, making sure the story wasn't just a moment, but a movement. She wasn't satisfied with apologies. She wanted change, and she knew how to get it. A press conference was scheduled that afternoon. Her office set it up quickly, choosing a space big enough for media, but still intimate enough to make people listen. I sat in the front row, just off camera, as she stepped up to the podium in a black blazer and calm, focused eyes. The room went quiet. No child, she began, should have to defend their existence in a lobby. No child should be interrogated for waiting patiently for their parent, and no child should be treated like a threat because of the color of their skin. You could feel the weight in the room. My son wasn't loud. He wasn't disrespectful. He didn't break a single rule. What he broke was a narrative. One that said a black boy alone must be doing something wrong, that he must be out of place. She paused, letting it land. But he wasn't out of place. He was where he was supposed to be. The problem wasn't his behavior, it was their perception. She looked into the crowd. I've built partnerships with hotel brands for years. I've signed contracts, booked venues, and spoken on their stages. Yet, even with all that, they couldn't see my son as anything other than a threat because they saw his skin before they saw his story. We can't keep patching over the issue with statements and task forces. We need to dismantle the lens that labels our children as suspects instead of sons. She was defending every kid who'd ever been told to leave a space they rightfully belonged in. Every boy who was followed in a store. Every girl questioned in a classroom. Every child made to feel like a problem before they even spoke. My son has nothing to apologize for, she continued, but this hotel chain does, and we're going to ensure that this isn't buried under next week's headlines. She stepped back from the podium without waiting for applause. Later that evening, they issued a public statement. The manager was placed on immediate leave. The brand promised a third-party audit of all guest policies and would be launching a new national anti-bias protocol. But none of that could erase the moment. The moment I realized people were more comfortable calling the police on me than asking me a single question. And if she hadn't walked in when she did, I don't even want to know how far it could have gone. The hotel chain made promises. New training programs, a partnership with a civil rights group, an internal review of every bias incident reported in the last 5 years. They even sent my mother a carefully worded letter thanking her for bringing this issue to light. But to me, none of that changed how I felt in that lobby. The memory of it didn't fade with their apology. I still remember the way the manager looked at me, not with curiosity but suspicion. I remember how the security guards stood too close, how the officers asked the same questions again and again, trying to twist my answers into something that justified their presence. They never got loud. That's what people always miss. They think racism shows up screaming, that it wears a hood or waves a sign, but most of the time it walks around in a pressed uniform, carrying a clipboard, pretending to enforce policy. All I did was sit still, and for that, they saw me as dangerous. Not because of what I said or did, but because of what I looked like. To them, my presence wasn't neutral, it was suspicious, and no training manual is going to rewrite that kind of bias overnight. I don't hate the hotel. I don't even hate the people in it, but I'll never forget how fast things turned. How quickly I went from a child with a comic book to someone who had to prove he wasn't doing anything wrong. That changes you, not into someone bitter, but into someone watchful. My mom knew that. That's why she didn't just fix the problem for me. She lit a fire under the entire system, because she knew that one day, another kid, maybe younger than me, would sit in that same chair in another hotel in another city. And they wouldn't have a CEO for a mother, they'd just have themselves. And the way they'd be treated would depend on whether the world had learned anything from what happened to me. I went back to school a few days later. Kids in my class had seen the story online. A few teachers pulled me aside. One called me brave. I didn't feel brave. I just felt tired. At recess, someone asked, "What did it feel like when your mom showed up?" I didn't know how to explain it. It wasn't just relief or pride. It was like breathing again after holding your breath for too long. It was knowing that I didn't have to explain myself anymore, because she walked in and they listened. They didn't see a child, they saw a problem. But then she walked in, and suddenly, the silence spoke louder than the sirens ever could. This story isn't just about me. It's about how fast assumptions can turn stillness into suspicion. How quickly your presence becomes a threat when your skin isn't the right color for the room. But more than that, it's about power, not the kind that yells. The kind that walks in, calm, composed, and undeniable. She wasn't just my mother. She was the reason that lobby froze. And if you've ever been told with words or looks that you don't belong, just know you're not alone. Some of us are born into rooms that don't welcome us. But some of us grow into the kind of people who own the building. Drop a comment and tell me what country you're watching from. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be seen and heard, hit that subscribe button. Let's make sure silence never wins.